Hey everybody. The second omni attribute that we want to look at is omnipresence. And so this is the idea that God is everywhere at once. Two attributes that we've skipped because they kind of overlap are called immensity and immateriality. And the first one, immensity, is that God fills all things and God cannot be measured. And so God, if God isn't a liquid, but if he was, you could just keep dumping him in, and there would be no end to the amount of God that would be poured into a cup or a waterfall or an ocean or whatever. God cannot be measured in this way. He's a different type of being. And immateriality is that God is a spirit. And so we often think of humans being physical creatures and angels being spiritual creatures, and we think of God being kind of the same as angels. But we need to understand that God is a spirit even in a different way than angels, and he has a different type of essence than the rest of creation. And so God has this spiritual nature about him which allows him to be everywhere at once. But God himself isn't the molecules, but he is present in his spirit in a different type of dimension. It's hard for us to understand that God inhabits reality, but yet he stands outside of it, of our created order. And so what I want to do is I want to read some verses that kind of look at the transcendence of God, the far awayness of God, but also the closeness of God, because this idea of being transcendent and being immanent is super important for us as Christians to think about. I want you to think about them, and they seem almost paradoxical or contradictory at first when we think about how God can both be far away and yet he can also be close to us at the same time. The first one is in Psalm 95. If I can find it in my Bible. This is Psalm 95, verses 3 to 5. It says, "Come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before him with thanksgiving and extol him with music and song. For the Lord is the great God, the great King above all gods. In his hand are the depths of the earth, and the mountain peaks belong to him. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land." So this is talking about worshiping God because God is bigger, he's above, he's beyond. Everything that God has created, he holds within his hands. He has formed them himself, and so they are smaller than him, and he is both in them but also beyond them. Psalm 139 is a beautiful psalm that a lot of people know. It's a personal psalm that shows both the transcendence, the farness of God, but also the closeness of God. It also deals with God's omniscience and his omnipotence. So I'm just going to actually read Psalm 139, verses 1 to 16, and think about the farness of God and think about the closeness of God as I read these. "O Lord, you have searched me, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all of my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, you know it completely." And so God's present, and he's watching everything. He knows what will happen. He's there, but he's also in the future. He's everywhere at once. "You hem me in, behind me and before me. You have laid your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me, too lofty for me to attain. Where can I go from your spirit?" The spirit that inhabits all of reality but goes beyond it. "Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up into the heavens, you are there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there too. If I rise on the wings of the dawn, if I settle on the far side of the sea, even there your hand will guide me. Your right hand will hold me fast." Think about the story of Job, that God wanted to escape the command of God to go to God's enemies and teach them about God. God wanted him to go to Nineveh, but Jonah tried to escape and went to Spain. But God was there too. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me, even the darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the dark, for darkness is as light to you. We cannot hide from God. He is everywhere, and he has intimate knowledge about who we are. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. He's talking about when he was conceived and in his mother's womb. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days adorned for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. In Acts 17, we see another example of this, and this time God, the God who's created everything, he's saying that he's close to us. This is in Acts 17, verses 27 to 28. Well, actually, I'm going to go back a verse or two. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by humans. So he's far away. And he's not served by human needs as if he needed anything, because he himself gives all men life and breath and everything else. For from one man he made every nation of men, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he determined the times and set for them and the exact places where they should live. God did this so that men would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. So can you see it? There's the farness of God, but yet also at the same time the closeness. For in him we live and we move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. We'll go to Colossians. Colossians is talking about Jesus, who is higher than all things. Jesus is the most important thing that has ever existed. And here's some descriptors about Jesus. It says, he is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For by him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things were created by him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Okay. Can you see that Jesus is above all things, and yet he's intimately involved in all of the processes to hold things together? Here's another one. This is from Romans. This is after Paul has talked so much about all the amazing things God has done for us in the Gospels, and listen to how he talks about God at the end. Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out. Who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has been his counselor? Who has ever given to God that God should repay him? For from him and through him and to him are all things. To him be the glory forever. And so the question I have is, depending on your church tradition, there's this polarity or this pendulum that just keeps swinging back and forth in church history, a desire to acknowledge the alien, holy, other, non-understandable distance of God, the transcendence of God, the bigness, the glory of God. This is why cathedrals were built, for the glory of God, to show the magnificence and the bigness of the God of the Bible and his story. And we're just small and insignificant. And so some of those high church traditions are really good at teaching us the transcendence of God, the otherness of God. But whenever these types of traditions take over, then there's a yearning in the heart for the immanence of God, the intimacy, the personalness, the understandable nature of God, the loving closeness of God. And we see that this goes back and forth, and right now our North America has been inundated with the seeker-sensitive movement and the charismatic movement and this desire to be close to Jesus and be his friend and taste him and touch him. But at the same time, there's also becoming a desire that he's becoming too much like us. And what's happening is there's a big migration back to the Orthodox and the Catholic traditions of our faith. People who are looking for an alien, other mysteriousness of God, something that's bigger than them, that they can put an anchor in with the chaos in our world. And so what happens typically in these types of churches is that if a church is transcendent, they will focus mostly on the holiness and the justice and the goodness and the righteousness of God. Whereas immanent churches will talk more about the mercy, the love, the compassion, the closeness, these different types of things. And both of these are super critical. Of all the verses we've looked at, we need to understand that God is both transcendent and immanent at the same time. And it's meant to bend our minds. And when we meet Jesus in the gospel, we meet him in the Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we see that he's trying to teach us to experience God, his Father, in both a transcendent way and an immanent way. When we meet Jesus in the Bible, he becomes like one of us. He sweats, he eats, he drinks, he cries, he laughs, he suffers just like us. And there's this immanency that God has become like us. There's something about God. By becoming flesh, he empathizes with us. He sympathizes with us. This is beautiful. This is in the Gospels. But at the same time, we see this otherness, this holiness, this distance, ununderstandable glory of Jesus Christ, this transcendence. And together we see both God and man in Jesus brought together so that we can understand and somehow live in this paradox. So I just want to invite us as we think about God's omnipresence, that God is with you throughout your day. He goes with you wherever you go. He is already there. He knows everything, and he is in all places, and he understands intimately all of creation without becoming part of it. This is the God that we know, this omnipresent God who is all in all places at once. He understands how they work. He understands how they function. He's sustaining all of them. This is the good God that we know.